So what are some of the downstream effects from an ad-based revenue model for writers? And how do you see that changing, not just subscription, but are there any new startups, like even in the crypto or decentralized payment space, that you think could change how content is monetized?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually just this past week launched an experiment called ghost knowledge, which is essentially, the hypothesis is that today, like writers have two ways to monetize essentially. One is ad based, and one is subscription based. But my sense is that that still leaves a large number of people without, who would like to write without a way to properly monetize. And so Ghost Knowledge was essentially an experiment that said, most of our like advancements as a society or civilization comes from, advances in publishing. And so what Ghost Knowledge does is it basically turns over the power to decide what gets written to an audience. An audience requests an essay, they pledge to an essay, and once a crowdfund meets a minimum amount, then the author will decide if they write it or not. And it's been fascinating to see how a lot of people that historically have not written, and in my opinion, I think that frankly, most of the content out there on startups, on technology, comes from people who don't operate startups on a day-to-day basis, and that's just a big disservice to people and builders. So my hypothesis was, what if we crowdfunded and turned the power over to people to decide what gets written? And it's been super fascinating to see the kinds of people that we've successfully crowdfunded and have gotten to agree to write something, who would have historically never written because they're not the kinds of people that would publish on a regular cadence. So I think all this is to say that, we're used to saying that the internet made everyone a journalist and that everyone now shares their thoughts. But the reality is that the vast majority of people still don't share their thoughts because they haven't had an incentive to do so, or a way to monetize, and that the subscription or ad-based models leave a lot of people kind of on the sidelines. So that's just kind of a small kind of drop experiment that we did just to prove out a model, because I'm very interested in the future of how we can monetize writing. I think honestly, from my own personal experience as somebody who's written a newsletter relatively consistently for the past 2 years, I think I see writing as networking for introverts. So yeah, when I set out to build a company, I had a list in my mind of all the people that I wanted to connect to, that I knew I'd kind of slowly maybe do some outbound outreach to. And what's interesting is, looking back, most of those people have reached out to me as a result of the ideas that I've shared on my newsletter. So I think writing is incredibly powerful, and writing on the internet is just untapped, and there's just so much leverage there. And I know David Perel talks about this a lot. So so I would encourage anyone to write, regardless of whether, they're going to get into the newsletter business or not. It's certainly been very impactful for me. And then, as far as what Substack is doing, personally, I'm concerned about the ceiling on finances and attention. I think that, I don't think that content alone can scale. I think that the people that have done really well, like Lenny, for instance, have found really interesting ways to become a platform. They've layered hiring. You can now, within that network and community, you can hire. So, I think that in order, people don't just subscribe to a newsletter, they want to join a community. And so, I think that world will kind of slowly evolve into that. And frankly, I think advertising today is undervalued as you think of what Packy's doing with newsletters. I'd argue Packy McCormick, who runs a newsletter called Not Boring, is probably making more money than most Substack subscription writers. So I think that it's so easy to just like read the headlines and assume that, subscription is the way to go. But I don't know. I happen to believe that it's very possible to build a great business with clean, simple advertising.